Hey everyone, Eric Ocasio here with Leadership is Tricky, and we are back with season six. So we have another interesting episode for you, and I have Joe Byerly. How you doing, Joe?
Good, Eric. Thanks for having me, man. Congratulations on your success.
No, I appreciate it. Hey, now you're a part of it, so I'm excited that you decided to come on and hang out with me and allowing me to capture your story. Yeah, so let's just jump right into it. Let's talk a little bit about you and let the audience know about yourself and and who young Joe was and where you're from and how you grew up, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so grew up in Savannah, Georgia. I was the oldest of four kids, all sisters. Dad was an electrician. Mom stayed at home with us quite a bit, and then she would bounce between working at the hospital as a nurse and sometimes even being our school nurse. Um, yeah, I was into reading as a kid. I was a couch potato, not really active at all. That came way later.
Right.
Yeah, I was into reading. I was actually into writing when I was a kid. I remember we had a typewriter, and I would like bang out these like comic book hero stories when I was like in third, fourth, and fifth grade. Like 3 pages all the time. Like it was fun for me. And then once I got into middle school, high school, and discovered dating and girls, and started chasing the popularity thing, the writing and even the reading started taking a back seat to social. And then like as we all like kind of build a persona of who we want Eric to be or who we want Joe to be.
Right.
And yeah, I was doing all that, and then didn't discover reading and writing again for almost 2 decades. But my grandfather was so my parents weren't in the military, but my grandfather was a veteran of World War II, was on the island hopping campaign as a Marine grunt, in fought in Iwo Jima. And then my uncle was in the Marine Corps, was a C-130 pilot. And so I just, and then my other grandfather was a Navy, or sorry, Air Force mechanic. And so I just like, for my family, service to the nation was viewed as something very respectable. And yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I graduated high school. And I remember I got a brochure for the University of North Georgia, which is one of the senior military colleges. Got it in the mail, threw it in the trash can. And
Yeah.
my mom went and got it out, because, like, I think some of the schools that I was thinking about were way out of my league, and ended up going there, falling in love with the Corps of Cadets in the Army. And then really, like, the rest is history.
Yeah, so going back to because you talked about service, you said your mom was a school nurse as well. So how was that, having your mom around? Uh,
It was cool until I don't think I like in middle school, the school nurse was one of the people that taught sex education.
oh,
So that was not cool at all. But no, my parents are great, man. So it was awesome having her around. And I wasn't a bad kid, so it wasn't a thing at all.
yeah, cool. All right, so no, because I think there's gonna be a recurring theme there. That's the reason I brought up service, and then you mentioned writing and reading a lot, and I think your shirt actually says "read" on it. But So you were in the army. So let's talk about those early days when you were in the army. What was that like for you, going through the service college, and then who were some of those early inspirational figures in your life?
Yeah, I got really lucky, man. So like right before I graduated, the HRC, Human Resources Command, my branch manager gave me a call. It was like, hey, we're testing out this program, and if you take this undesirable assignment for your first assignment, we'll send you to any school we want to, and we'll give you duty location of choice after that. And it was only 6 hours away from college. It was at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds awesome. And then once I got to Fort Knox, Kentucky, it was a new branch manager who didn't know anything about the deal of any school of choice and duty assignment of choice. But I went to this assignment, and my very first company commander, a guy named Lewis Netherland,
Okay.
was a platoon leader under, at the time, Lieutenant Colonel H.R. McMaster. And so McMaster, who would go on to be, fought in the Battle of 73 Easting as a company commander, would go on to be the national security advisor for the president. I mean, just an amazing guy. But as a squadron commander, he taught them the importance of writing for the profession and the importance of reading and the importance of physical fitness. And so I had this platoon leader who is now a company commander for me, constantly nailing those principles into me very early on. And so I knew that, to be somebody who was invested in the profession of arms, I needed to do those things. And it took a while for those things to take root because I was like 23, 24.
Right.
So I was still having parties on the weekends. And, like the only, I was doing the work stuff during the duty week, but I wasn't really investing in myself outside. And that came a lot later with a little bit more maturity and some more examples under my belt.
Yeah, I think that's everybody's story, right? Especially in our 20s, we don't really understand the lessons that are being placed at our feet, right? And all that feedback we get, we don't take it as the gift that it is, right? But it comes with maturity. We get there. Yeah. So I mean, you did over 20 years. So that's the first part of your time in the military. But as you've gone on to other assignments, right? Because you have key developmental positions in the military. What was that time like for you as a company commander, battalion commander-ish time, if that's the route that you went?
Yeah. So company command was, like I remember those lessons that Lewis Netherland ingrained in me. And so I wanted to pass that on as a company
Hmm.
commander. So I remember even being deployed and still taking time out of our schedule, doing patrols and all that, to talk about reading, to talk about writing with my platoon leaders. And at the time, like I knew reading was important. I was reading, maybe 4 to 5 professional books a year. And then a story that you've heard that I've talked about before, read about this race to the pole, to Antarctica, to the South Pole in 1911. And to boil it down, you had one team led by a guy who only relied on his experiences and was really focused on promotion. And then you had another guy who had read everything he could get his hands on about polar exploration to add and complement to his experiences. And I remember reading that and seeing that, like, hey, this is going to be really important for me in my career. That, along with the examples of those leaders that I had come across who were avid readers, I immediately upped my game, Eric, and I went from reading 4 to 5 books a year to like 45 to 50 books a year, shortly after command. And what I found was, like, as I was going into those positions of increased authority, increased responsibility, increased stress and pressures, and just the demands of the job, all of a sudden I was able to not only rely on those experiences and the people I saw in those different assignments, but I was also able to rely on the stuff that I'd read about in books. So I was able to bring like techniques and tactics and different ideas and perspectives to each of my jobs. And I found that over time that gave me a competitive advantage as a leader. And then going into battalion command was just amazing. It was a huge responsibility, and it was something I didn't take lightly. And I used that 2 years in command as kind of like my leadership laboratory for to test all the ideas I had developed along the way. And it was just a very rewarding assignment. It was like a walk-off home run
Right.
for me in the United States Army. It was amazing. And then retired right out of command, which I do not recommend people do, because that's retirement's a whole thing in itself. But I thought I could do it because I still got some of that young 20-year-old. I know what the hell I'm doing, Eric, like still any
Right.
man. And so, yeah, so I retired in August of 24 and immediately went back to the beginning all over again of writing. And I get paid to be a full-time writer now and absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's cool because one of the things that you mentioned was, drawing back on your experiences, right? Which a lot of the feedback we get from the podcast, and that's the reason I do it, is that people can see themselves in those experiences. So you live that, right? You read all of these stories and books, and you drew from those leadership challenges that existed before you, because there's nothing that can happen right now that we haven't seen before, or someone has seen before, or captured in some type of journal somehow. I just had an interview with Mark Hertling, General Mark Hertling. And he talked about capturing his stories when he was in Iraq the first time, and he didn't know if he was going to make it home, so he started journaling, and he captured these stories, and he just published a book about his, kind of his memoirs, but these were stories to his sons who are were also in command in combat, right? And now they're drawing from those experiences. That's what just took me back to what he was talking about is, capturing those stories in that moment and then being able to reflect back on it. So, and interesting enough, for you, you were able to draw on those experiences, even as crazy as a polar exploration, right? But you took the tips and techniques that came from that, and were able to apply it. So, can you just look back on your time in the military and what was like one of those significant leadership challenges that you had to work through, and then what did
Yeah.
you learn? And what did you learn from it?
Well, I'll start with a failure. Like I remember my very first command, like, property accountability is a really big deal for a
Right.
company commander. And because of the early experiences I had and the leaders I worked for, I didn't necessarily have a good background going into command. So I made a lot of mistakes with property accountability, so much so that like I remember me leaving Iraq as a company commander was dependent on a document getting signed releasing me of culpability of a very high valued missing item. And so thankfully I was chosen for a second command, and because I guess they saw potential in me. And I had about 2 months off between command. And so instead of like wasting, that time being like, oh man, I'm so tired, whatever, I was like, I'm gonna figure out what the hell I did wrong, and I'm never gonna make that mistake again. And not only am I not gonna make that mistake again, I'm going to learn these lessons so well that I teach everybody that like my subordinate leaders. And so I read every regulation I could get my hands on around property accountability. I asked questions, and I even I wrote stuff out like verbatim that was in the regulations just so I could understand it even better. And then instead of being one of those like crazy commanders who treat everybody poorly when it comes to property and stuff like that, I use it as an opportunity to educate. So every hand receipt holder I had after that, I would personally give them a class on property accountability and explain the different types of responsibility and made sure they understood what they were getting into before they ever inventoried an item or signed an item. And then as I went into command, I tried to, again, continue to teach people. And then I had empathy for folks that were making the same mistakes I did, and was a little
Right.
bit more forgiving than I think I would have. So I think like that's a great example. And you mentioned general hurtling and journaling. That's another thing, Eric, that I wish I would have done way sooner in my career. January 21st, or sorry, January 1st, 2021 was the first time I started journaling. And I've done it every day since then. And that has been a huge tool that I have leaned on for personal growth, and just being able to capture things that are happening, and you can kind of look back, what was I doing on this day 3 4 years ago, and learn something from it, as well as like those challenges that you have in life, those key moments that are like very developmental for you,
Hmm.
and you're like, man, how the hell am I gonna, and developmental is code for like, this sucks, like, how am I gonna get to the other side of this?
Right.
You can go back and look and see what you were thinking when you were in the trenches, and then as you're going through stuff now, be like, man, I've made it through this stuff before, I'll do it again. So yeah, journaling is something I wish I would have started doing way younger in my military career.
Yeah, one thing I would say, so I've tried journaling, it's just I'm not very consistent, right? There's certain things that I'm extremely consistent about. So I tried it, and I probably lasted about 4 months, right? And then it just
Okay.
fell off the rails. But I did resort to now when I'm in a leadership challenge, is I have a red book that I walk around with at work, and I will capture that moment. Or if I hear something, some kind of phrase or some type of explanation of something, I will write it in my book. So then I go back and reflect on those things. I've found that to be more palatable, I guess, with my mentality and my lack of discipline, right? Um, and then just sit and journaling, sit and journaling. But I know a lot of folks that do journaling and they love it, and they're able to go back and, see their lives in their words as they're writing their chapters of their life. And no, that's really cool. So let me ask you. Because you had various jobs, everything from, second cav and fourth squadron, and then you ended up as an advisor to the commanders, some commanders within the 82nd Airborne Division, which is one of my bosses now, here at
Yeah,
USARAF.
yeah.
And yeah, and I missed you when you were out here, but so talk about that, being an advisor to a commander and, at that level, seeing what they're dealing with. And then how do you advise them? And what did you take from that experience?
Yeah, so I had the fortune or misfortune, depending on how you want to look at it. I ended up working for three senior leaders within a 4 year period, almost like back to back to back. I worked for the commander of JSOC. I worked for the commander of Resolute Support Mission Afghanistan, and then I worked for General Donahue when he was in the 82nd, and then as he transitioned over to 18th Airborne Corps. And like people would ask me, like, well, what do I, like what have you learned from the job? And I think there's like three things, and then I'll answer your question. Is one is like be there whenever they need you, get out
Hmm.
of their way when they don't. And if you don't have anything to do, just make sure you're echoing their message to the rest of the staff because there's a lot of friction on high level staffs and they're always trying to interpret what the boss is thinking, what the boss is saying. And so if you can be that whisperer that's going around and talking to the different directors or department heads and echoing what the boss is trying to do and make sure that their intent is being captured, then you can make them so much money. But yeah, I feel like each of us has a gift, right? Like, some people may be excellent organizers as far as calendars. Some people may be extremely responsible and, like they never forget a name or a face or something like that. Mine was writing. That's the thing that pulled me into these jobs was my ability to write very quickly, synthesize thoughts, and then help them even go back and forth. And, guys like General Miller, General Donahue, and General Howe, like everything that they ever wrote was their words. It was just a back and forth between the two of us kind of massaging things out or sometimes a leader may just need to see a draft of something to
Hmm.
realize that's not what they want and it helps them zero in on what they do want. So yeah, that was a lot of my jobs. It was writing emails, writing speeches, writing things for hire, up to hire. And then as I did those, more and more, my network expanded. So, you could call people who in other locations and kind of find out what was going on and feed that information back to your boss. And so it was really rewarding to be able to use your gift to help somebody else out. But then for me, being able to watch things from like being able to watch the behaviors of General Donahue,
Hmm.
General Howe, and General Miller, and then take those into command with me. Like I was a completely different leader because of it. And so I think like just the benefit, it's like getting a PhD in leadership, being able to watch people up close and be in those front offices was a really rewarding thing that ended up paying dividends. For my squadron because there was a little bit of each of those gentlemen that I took with me into command.
Yeah, it's crazy when you're exposed to high levels of leadership, especially good leaders. I mean, you do draw some from some of those that have some developmental areas in their leadership abilities, right? You do draw, some experiences from that. But I mean, when you're around great minds, I mean, it does pay dividends, and I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, you can draw so much from them, and then you can use that if you would like to invest in that activity and push that back into your formations or back into your workforce or your organization. And it fills some of your blind spots as well, right? Especially when you're making stressful, high level decisions. You've probably seen it before or how they've like operated in that high intense moment. So, and for those that don't know what JSOC means, that's Joint Special Operations Command. These are the folks that are doing some of the complex work within the Army. And yeah, so all right, so from the Green Notebook. right? And this is how we met. You were given a talk to a lot of junior leaders on really the power of actually reading. And I think it's starting to become a lost art. And because everything's now in bite-sized increments, everyone's looking at Instagrams and they're trying to microwave everything. But let's talk about one, your affinity for reading, and then why from the Green Notebook, which is your platform that was launched in 2013 timeframe. So let's talk about where you got that affinity for reading, why you think reading is so important, and then why from the Green Notebook.
Real quick, Eric, before I answer all those things, I want to go back. Like you talked about carrying a notebook around, and
Yep.
I was looking like I would carry these 3x5 moleskin notebooks with me. I keep them in my back pocket, and so like I was just trying to like flip through real quick and find where they're at because I have a stack of them here. But like when the things about like some of those leaders that like guys like General Donahue and General Miller, amazing communicators,
Hmm.
and they're always saying things that are very sticky. And so I remember I would write down things that they were saying, and so I could constantly go back and reflect on them. Like matter of fact, I'm looking at it right now, and so like uh yeah, like so like this is like 16 March 2020. We're in Afghanistan, COVID's happening.
Right.
The government of Afghanistan is literally like splintering. The Taliban, we just signed the deal with the Taliban. So all these things are like COVID's very disruptive. And I remember Miller said disruptive events cause you to figure out what is essential. And get back to that. So like I wrote that down and I did the same thing with Hal. I did the same thing with Miller throughout. I mean, Donahue. So I think like having something on you at all times to take notes,
Right.
whether it's like the things that you do with your red book, the challenges you're facing every day, or you're working for an amazing leader. And last thing on that too is the bad leaders as well. Like I had several of those, and those gentlemen were as equally important to how I led as those great leaders, because I knew exactly what I didn't want to do or who I didn't want to be when it came time for me to be in charge. And and so on that, right? Like I bet if you were to look back on your professional career, Eric, and think through how many of like horrible, terrible like people that you worked for where you just didn't want to get up and go to work and you were like, man, like I could work at a food truck right now and I would probably be so like things like that are like going through your head. I bet it's only on a hand maybe. The years that you've put in, and on mine I can count 3 to 4 amazing leaders that I worked for, that were just like up here, and I can also count maybe 3 or 4 just horrible individuals that I worked for, but like that's not a lot. And so I think if you look at the books behind me, they are full of like some of the most amazing leaders throughout history, as well as some really bad people too. And so you can sit down and read and pull the lessons like we were talking about from the polar expedition. You can read and learn from those. And so, I have like stacks of these notebooks all over, almost to the point where I probably look like a crazy person. But they're just filled with quotes and passages and stories, of all these people, and it's really important too to like write that stuff down. There's a guy who was a peer of Machiavelli, and he had something called the Ricordi, where he would do the exact same thing, the thing that you're talking about. Like he would keep this book and write down things that were important. And he says something in there about, like just by going back and constantly reviewing the Ricordi, he's like, at least he's like, it's really hard to be the person I want to be, but at least the stuff is like right on the tip of my tongue because I'm constantly looking at it. And that's at least giving me a little bit of help. And I messed the quote up, but it's something along those lines. And so for me, reading, not just reading, but then taking those things and putting them into notebooks and then constantly looking at them, really just helped shape who I wanted to become. So I think I answered your question on reading because I talked a whole bunch and added some stuff to it. But yeah, Green Notebook, it's the government issued Green Notebook. I started the blog in 2014, I'm sorry, 2013 is just a personal blog. And I was so scared to put my name on it that I wrote under a pseudonym for like the first like 6 months, and I was publishing like once a week. But then my ego got hurt because I was watching these people praise this anonymous author, and I wasn't getting any of it.
Like that's
Um,
me.
yeah, yeah. And they're like, "Shut up!" No, it's not. But I didn't want like because I was a combat arms officer, and at the time, like it was frowned upon to be a writer. Because it was considered intellectual, and
Right.
people were proud of being anti-intellectual. At least that was a perception that I had. And so I started the blog, and I was posting on it, and then I would have friends write me, or I'd be hanging out, and they'd be like, "Hey, man, I have this idea. If I write it, will you publish it?" And I was like, "Sure." And then I started getting emails from people I didn't even know with submissions for the blog, and then had to ask people to help out. And so Green Notebook is now been going for 13 years, and it's been amazing. We've had a team of volunteers rotating through, over the last like 8 9 years, just keeping the blog going because I definitely couldn't do it on my own. And then we expanded into the podcast and several newsletters. So it's been like it's like my baby. It's like a teenager now, which is amazing. And it's been cool to like help and influence so many people. I think we're up to like 4 or 5 million views on
Right.
the website, and it's awesome. You get emails all the time from different generations of folks who've been influenced, not by my writing, but by the writing of people who've submitted to things on the website. So it's been awesome, man, and it really helped set me up for what I'm doing now.
Yeah, it's funny though, just to watch you through this, and for those that are watching, just go back maybe like 5 6 minutes ago when we were talking about the military, and then we transition to the work that you're doing now, and you light up when you talk about what your passion and what you feel like your purpose is, and I know that feeling, right? Yours might be a teenager, mine's still in diaper, or maybe out of diapers now, right? But yeah, I mean, doing these podcasts or doing the writing and doing the speaking engagements. I mean, I don't know about you, but I draw a lot of energy from those moments that I get to sit down and do things like this because I get to share this with the rest of the world. Um, but I saw you light up, so I know that feeling. Very cool.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I'm really glad you pointed that out too, because like, and it's interesting. It's like people, whether it's reading, whether it's whatever physical activity, whatever, like people are like, I don't have time for that, I'm too busy. And Seth Godin, who's one of my favorite authors, he says, you don't need more time, you simply need to decide. And what I found was that, as I was in these like crazy challenging jobs, and every job I took from major on, people would tell me, "Hey, you're going to have to shut the blog down. Like there's no way that you can do that job and do this at the same time." And what I found was like I would make time. Like if I had to get up an hour earlier to do this, then I
Hmm.
would. And so, I love the army, man, and I love the people in it. But there's a lot of stuff that you have to do that's not fun at all.
Right.
In order to have those like little bits of like chocolate chip moments throughout the day where you're like, man, that filled me up. And with this, it's like I've been out since 2024, and I still feel like I'm on leave, which is crazy to me. Because like I'm putting in a ton of work. I've got a lot of projects going on right now, and yeah, it doesn't feel like work at all. And that's when I know that like, okay, I'm on the path I'm supposed to be on.
Yeah, one of the sayings that I say a lot is you have to live your purpose. You'll always live someone else's purpose. Right? And then once you find that thing that you're passionate about, I mean, your cup stays full, right? Even when, I feel like it's draining, coming, sitting in traffic, getting here. But yeah, I mean, this is what we were meant to do, and it's pretty cool. So, all right, so. There's one thing I did want to ask you about, right? It's called the Leader's 90-Day Notebook, right? It's a tool that you've put together, you've published. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah. So okay, so earlier you were talking about, well, I've journaled and then I've like fallen off after 4 months. And I remember when I got started, it's like, well, what do I journal about? Like nothing happened. Like at first it's like, what am I even writing about? And I struggled with that at first, and then over time I started like thinking about the things that I really wanted to focus on. And so I developed a format for myself. And the way it looks is like, obviously the date, but like how much sleep did I get last night? So I'm always tracking my sleep because it's like super important to me. And then it's like, what did I do to work out today? What was my workout for the day? Because even in retirement, like I'm almost in better shape now than I was when I was on active duty. And then I have headings that I put in my own journal. I write them out, and it's like, it's just a summary of the day. It's what decisions did I make today, and I think this is a really neat one. I read about it in a Harvard Business Review book where the guy was like, "How do you know if you make good decisions?" And so he would write decisions down, and he would write what he thinks going to result from that decision, and then he would go back in his notebooks and look at them 6 months, removed from them to see if it was a good decision or not. And so I like writing down the decisions I made for that day and kind of go back and look, and I can say like, oh man, I didn't get sleep and I made some really bad decisions. I
Right.
talk about things that I write about what I'm struggling with, just so I can like really capture that. I'll write down like something I learned today, that was new, really forces me to learn. I'll write down what I accomplished. That's another important thing. And I'm sure you're the same way, Eric, is like you do a lot, but then you don't give
Hmm.
yourself credit for any of it.
Right.
And so for me, like just writing down like, hey, today I did the Leadership is Tricky podcast. I went and dropped off dry cleaning. I got the oil changed. I finally, finished that book, whatever. It's just a way to like capture that stuff. And then gratitude. And there's tons of study that show that when you start journaling about things you're grateful for, it starts changing your frame of reference. You actually start looking at things that you're grateful for. And then finally, the last thing I journal about is like a key insight I had from that day about myself. And what's really cool is like the Leader's 90-day notebook, those prompts are set up that way. So all you have to do is open the book, just go through and fill those things out. And I think if you can do something for 90 days that's not a huge cognitive load, like you're not sitting there like, man, what do I need to write about today? You get in the habit of writing that. It makes journaling a habit for you to where, you're getting rid of that notebook and then you've got your own journal that you're setting up yourself, which is what I do now. And so, and it's neat too, like when I journal, just kind of like writing out things like whatever, just kind of meandering along the page. What I find is that it's kind of like it's interesting to go back and look. But when you have that format, it's really cool because you can quickly say, like, boom, this is what I was struggling with at this time. Like, oh man, I got that insight back then. Or, hey, like, oh man, like I'm, not happy with this person, but like a year ago, I was talking about how great they were here. And so, maybe what happened. So, anyways, I think that format has helped me. So I wanted to create something to get other people into journaling. And it's cool. Like, we don't do a lot of marketing for it.
Right.
We just have it on the website. As far as like, I'll occasionally mention it. But like we've sold like 1,000 copies of it, which is cool because people are giving it as gifts, and getting them out. And then we have the other one, the My Green Notebook, Know Thyself Before Changing Jobs, that I developed with Cassie Crosby. And that's another one, like it's a 30-day guided reflection. This one has
Hmm.
particular things like looking at communication, looking at assertiveness, looking at different skills and attributes you need as you climb an organization. And you can go back and there's 2 questions for each of those skills or attributes every single day. And you spend 30 days and you go through and you have a book that captures, how you do something or, where areas of growth. And then you can kind of take those and collect those along an entire career. And that one does really well. That's like a huge, like Christmas time PCS gift a lot of people give.
Yeah, I think that's a very timely book too, especially with everything that's happening right now with the job market and all of that, and folks that are looking at career transitions and uncertainty. I think that book will help too, as they're kind of navigating that space, from one career to the next. So one, where can folks get these books? What's the website?
Yeah. So, I mean, just go to Amazon. And you can just type in Joe Byerly. You can type in My Green Notebook or type in Leaders 90-Day Notebook, and it's on there. And I'm like in the process of revamping some stuff on our website
Okay.
to where it's a lot more easier to find. But yeah, you can do it there. And then we have the two newsletters that we put out every month is the monthly reading list email, which is 3 to 5 books that I'm reading that I recommend. And I talk about every email has a plug for My Green Notebook and the Leaders 90-Day Notebook. And I've been doing that email since 2017, which is another great forcing mechanism to read every month, Eric. And then I have the Sunday email, which is a weekly email. And that one's just a weekly reflection on, like, usually it's something I'm wrestling with for the week. But I'll pull in stories and quotes from all sorts of places for that particular email. And I also talk about the journals in that one as well.
All right, and for those that didn't catch it, I'll drop the links below so that way you guys can get to the Amazon for both the books. So yeah, so just as we're coming up on time here, what I do with everyone that comes on here is I ask, the final question is like, if there's someone listening right now, some young adult, some leader in transition, maybe some senior leader out there looking for some inspiration. What's the one thing you would leave them with from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, I would say that, like, to remain curious. There's so much out there to discover, and not just like curious about the world outside, but the world inside too. Like, if you would have asked me 15, 16 years ago that I would ever see myself retiring out of the military and becoming a full-time writer, I'd have been like, Eric, what are you talking about, man? Like, I don't write. I was like, I barely read.
All right.
I don't see that how that's going to happen. So I think, yeah, just remain curious about yourself and remain curious about the world around you, because I guarantee you, whatever problem, leadership problem or personal problem you're facing, somebody, whether somebody in modern times or somebody in the ancient world, has dealt with the same exact problem, and they've written about it, and you can learn from them and do better than they did, just by taking the time to read about it.
All right. So do you have like a top 10 books list?
Oh man, yeah, it's a tough one. So it's funny, man. Like, one of the things I've been working on now for like 8 months is 20 books in 20 years.
Okay.
It's a page I'm working on my website of just different books that have influenced me. So I'll just, like, Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday is one of my favorites, just because I think in the military a lot of us have egos, and so it's just a great way to remind yourself, am I doing this because I want to, or am I doing this because it feeds my ego?
Hmm.
Another one is Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. It's like the ultimate leadership book. Talks about the Spartans defending
Hmm.
Thermopylae. I read that before my first deployment and completely changed, how I went into it with, looking at combat for the first time. There's Brief by Joe McCormick, which is all about how to write concise and effective emails, as well as give brief, like, PowerPoint briefings and stuff like that. There's A Minute to Think by Juliet Funt, which is all about carving time throughout the duty day, or just in our lives in general, to just take a step back and reflect and think a little bit. I thought that book was absolutely amazing. There's one I just finished called Mind Over Grind,
Okay.
by Dr. Guy Winch, which is all about dealing with stress throughout the work week, from the Sunday scaries to waking up at 2 a.m. ruminating about something that happened earlier today or the thing that's going to happen tomorrow. Yeah, there's like so many books, man, that like, and I think that's the thing, is like different books had different effects on me throughout my career. And so it's been really hard to go back and like capture all of them, because like a book may have been really important to me as a captain or a young major, but then as a lieutenant colonel it wasn't important, but this book over here was super critical to my success. So yeah, so I'm still working on that. I try to do a little bit each week. um, been procrastinating a little bit, but those, I guess, those are some ones to get you started.
Yeah, so after our encounter this summer, I actually went and downloaded Gates of Fire. So
Ah, yeah, and you
I've
got
read
inner
that one.
excellence too.
Yeah, and one of the ones that I really found to be one of my favorites is Creativity Inc.
Yes.
right? So the rise of Pixar. And if you haven't read that book and Gates of Fire, I would really recommend you start with those two if you're struggling with. And if you don't like reading, you want a audio book, then go ahead and get the audio book. But at least get started because, I mean, my books here is full, right? I read all the time. I've got even policies and regulations on my phone here, and I'm constantly curious to your point earlier on what's out there. But you got me started with those two this summer, and I was like, oh, let me check out what he's talking about. And really, really transformational books, and you get into the mindset of those that we probably watched in a movie, but now you're reading the words and hearing their stories.
I'm glad you said that, Eric. Creativity Inc. was one of those books I saw, like, it was on all these different reading lists, like not in the military, but in the corporate world. And I was like, I don't know what I could actually gain from that. But
Hmm.
I read it right before going into command. And that is another one of those books that could really shaped how I led. And like it made me think about things a lot differently than I would have if I didn't read that book. And so I was actually trying to find my copy. It's somewhere down here below me, but it is like marked up and tabbed. And I found myself referencing that a lot in command. So I mean, again, it's just crazy to think that I was leading with lessons from Disney Pixar.
Yeah.
Leading 500 combat soldiers in Europe. And so I'm glad you had that book on there. Have you read? I see you had Inner Excellence on there too. Have you read that one?
I've gotten probably about 20% through it. Because I'm the type of person I can't focus on one book all of the time. So then I jump around, from chapters to chapters. But I'll get through it. But it's been pretty good. I even downloaded a book by David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me.
Yeah. What do you think
Right?
about that?
He's crazy. But the discipline and the mindset is insane, and you want to strive for that. I think me personally, I think he's a little too extreme for me, but I can see how it works for him, right? But he's really he is really a tough cat, and his mentality is I'm not going to fail. I'm going to burst through these barriers that we set for ourselves. And yeah, it's been helpful. Just going back to it, and then now all of a sudden he's on my Instagram all the time. So um,
Man, the algorithm's listening. It's always watching us. Yeah.
absolutely. All right, so Joe, I want to thank you first for taking the time to share your thoughts and your story with us. And for those that are repeat listeners of the podcast, thank you for coming on and sharing time and listening in. Please check out From the Green Notebook. It's all on all your major podcast platforms. Go check out the website. Get registered on the newsletter. Click the links below because we'll have access to his books and to help you get journaling. I think I'm gonna go try the 90-day journaling tool and I'll check back at me on day 120, right, and motivate me. But no, Joe, really, thank you for your time. Thank you for what you've done for our country, what you continue to do for curious minds out there, and promoting the act of reading because I don't think enough people do it, right? So get off of Instagram like me, pick up a book, get lost in those worlds that are out there and those stories and lose yourself in those experiences that are out there. So, any party shots?
Yeah, man. I think finally, and this is something I'm doing now in retirement, is like, you and I were just sitting here talking about, I mean, Gates of Fire is fiction, but we're talking about nonfiction books. But yeah, like read fiction too. I'm going back and like slowly rereading classics. So Darkness at Noon, All the King's Men, Great Gatsby. I've got the annotated edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein coming today. So yeah, just dive back into those too. There's some great life lessons in those books that are encoded in the form of stories. So that's my parting shot, Eric.
Awesome. All right, so you heard it from Joe. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode.